Mikal Bridges has committed to playing with Team USA in the FIBA World Cup happening this summer. There's going to be some other Nets and maybe future Nets involved with that as well. Plus, we have some NBA off-season for some teams madness that never seems to stop. Some old friends getting into the mix. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more right after the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, those Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am Doug Norrie. I'm the owner and operator of DFSR.com. That is one of the longest running projection outlets for daily fantasy over on FanDuel and DraftKings. Go check it out. You can get a free trial right now to DFSR.com. We've been running NBA projections, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA. It's all up there over at DFSR. I've been doing it for years and years and years. Go grab that free trial, DFSR.com. No Adam Armbrecht on the show today. He'll be back again tomorrow as we begin and continue rolling through this Nets off season. Plenty to talk about always as we get going. The Nets haven't played for a while. Then that sweep of the Sixers feels like an absolute life to the hands of the Sixers feels like an absolute lifetime ago. That's all right. Nets world, there's always stuff to talk about coming up on the draft. Obviously, going to be probably, maybe significant offseason movement here. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But wanted to get into it today, just a good sign in sort of like Nets world about what's happening here with maybe, the future and the youth and who they have rolling on the team. Because word comes out at the beginning of this week, late Monday, early Tuesday, I believe, that Mikal Bridges is going to be playing for Team USA at the FIBA World Cup in the Philippines later on in August. A really cool move and a sign that of what we kind of already knew about Bridges, that he is one of the up and coming stars in the NBA right now. We'll get to some of the other names that are on the list that have not, the whole team has not been confirmed yet that's going to play for Team USA. We do know a few names that are on this, and honestly, where it's one of the cool things about what's happening here with Bridges is that he becomes one of the highlights. We're kind of removed from being in a situation where the Nets have had like this kind of player on their team, this sort of like budding national name, up and coming, just being included with some of the other, younger up and coming names in the NBA right now is like sort of rounding out and maybe anchoring this Team USA when the FIBA World Cup does come around, and Bridges is one of those guys. And it makes a lot of sense, right? From what we know and what we saw from Mikal Bridges over the second half of this year, specifically from the trade deadline on, when he became a Net coming over in the Kevin Durant trade, we saw in a very cool way, and something you actually don't get to see every day. We sort of saw like a blossoming of his potential and his overall game over the course of the second half of the season, from the trade, it's less than half the season, but from the trade deadline on with Bridges, as he became, a go-to scorer, a heavy usage guy, a guy who could get into the mid-range, a guy who could find and create his own shot in a multitude of ways, a guy who could sort of like beginning to show this evidence of possibly carrying an offense for long stretches. And that's what we got to see from Bridges when he was able to sort of not break free, but leave the Suns organization where it was always going to be tough to do that. Devin Booker there. They have Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton running a lot of pick and roll. Obviously, it was going to be a situation that for the long term was going to be hard for him to sort of round out his offensive game. But we ended up seeing that happen in Brooklyn. And I think that honestly, that time in Brooklyn, or specifically the time in Brooklyn, is what I think ultimately leads to his inclusion on Team USA. Now, would he have been included anyway? Look, there's some other sort of role player-ish guys that are included in these teams. Like we're not looking at a full-on superstar group that's going to be headed to the Philippines for Team USA. But it does feel like this last half of the season, or this last third of the season that Bridges spent with the Nets, I mean, clearly changed people's view of him in the long term. Short term and long term, clearly changed like where his like sort of overall rank in the overall NBA hierarchy is. And I think that's like very clear. I mean, this isn't news. This isn't some kind of hot take about the Mikal Bridges situation. We saw it happen. We saw his name sort of almost instantly elevated well above what I think even the most pro Bridges and most bullish Bridges believers, a lot of B's there for you, would have thought would have been the case with him coming over in the Kevin Durant trade, even though he was, the big name in that trade. But if anyone thought he was as good as this, if go think back to the Kevin Durant trade, there's almost no way that package would have included as much other things as it was or ended up being included if anyone thought Bridges was going to be this good. Like there's no Cam Johnson's coming over in the trade if they think Bridges is this good. Not as many picks are coming over in the Bridges. They might not have traded him. I mean, I think they probably would have for Kevin Durant ultimately because of the, just Durant's so amazing. But Bridges, it's a testament to how much Bridges sort of like took off when he became part of the Brooklyn Nets. And so we get a situation where he ends up now being one of the main names included in this FIBA World Cup team. And it's just a very, very cool situation. And one that if you're a basketball fan anyway, maybe you're going to be tuning into the World Championships to begin with. But now if you're a Nets fan, among some other guys that we'll mention here a little bit later, it's just another reason to sort of tune in to the situation here, because it'll be interesting to see how Mikal Bridges fits in with some of the other names that are included on this list, because this is a pretty young, pretty athletic, up and coming group that they've already have committed to play here with Team USA. Other guys that are included, Anthony Edwards from the Timberwolves. Obviously, we know that he's sort of been a star on the rise. Some people are, very bullish about the future with him. It's really, really easy to see why. Tyrese Haliburton from the Pacers is going to be there, running the point clearly, although they do have Jalen Brunson as well. So they have a couple just really dynamic point guards. Those guys go about their business in two totally different ways, to the point where you could probably even play them together depending on how they end up structuring some of these Team USA rotations. Austin Reeves, another guy who, I mean, completely, you would say this season out of nowhere in terms of like where he ended up landing in the overall just sort of like NBA list. I don't think anyone, again, we talk about like, you talk about even the most bullish people on Bridges. Reeves is like a totally different category too, just becoming like sort of like this pick and roll monster with the Lakers. And now he's going to get paid in a massive, massive way here this offseason. He ends up being on the team. And then the other guys that are confirmed already for the group right now is Bobby Portis. And then I mentioned Jalen Brunson already. So that's 6 of them. There's going to be 12 altogether when it comes to who ends up playing for this team. It's kind of unclear who the other 6 are going to be, whether they fill it out with role players, whether they end up kind of going the route of, clearly they're going to need some more bigs. This is sort of like guard heavy at this point with the guys that end up being included. So we'll see how the rest of the team rounds out. I think we're probably looking more bigs. We're probably looking, they don't have a center on the team yet. FIBA rules definitely incentivize you to play centers and bigs because you can kind of hang in the lane. So they're going to need probably more of a defensive presence when it comes to who the rest of this roster rounds out. And I think that's actually ends up being pretty good news for these guys that are already on the group, including Bridges, because if you think that it's going to be rounded out with just some more bigs and maybe guys that aren't necessarily like super high usage guys, we could be looking at a pretty big offensive role for a guy like Bridges all said and done. So really pretty cool news. You like the way this is kind of shaking out for the Nets. You like to see this as being sort of like the trajectory for a guy like Bridges being included in groups like this, being mentioned among like sort of the up and coming stars that, FIBA, or in this case, Team USA, wants to showcase when it comes to like bringing out some of the bigger names on the international stage. So really cool moment here for Bridges. We'll see how it ends up. We'll see how the rest of at least the USA team roster ends up shaking out. But for now, in terms of like the big first movers into this group, Bridges gets included You really like to see it. And if you were already a fan of what he was going to be doing on the basketball court, this has to make you feel pretty good as well. Want to get into a few more names from Nets world that are included in terms of the FIBA World Cup coming up here. Also, definitely later, a little bit later on, got to talk a little bit about this NBA offseason madness. In addition to just the finals rolling on here, just some like absolute crazy news coming out in the Kyrie Irving camp. Old friend Kyrie, I know he's not on the Nets anymore, but it's just worth a mention at the end of the show. So we'll get here into that in a second. Before we get to that, going to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Look, buying tickets these days should not be a hassle. It should be fun. You want to go to the game. You want to go to the concert. You want to go to the theater. This is the kind of thing that should not be stressful. You're in there to have a good time. And this is where Game Time has it sorted out to take away the stress and to make it very, very easy. You want to get the tickets fast. You want to be able to buy tickets for anything you want: sports, music, comedy, theater, anything in your area. Game Time has killer deals on last minute tickets. They have the best price guaranteed. You can stop stressing about the tickets and just worry about going to see your favorite artist, going to see your favorite team, going to see your favorite show. That is what Game Time has for you right now. In the New York area, they got some great stuff going on. The Yankees Mets coming up here on the 13th at Citi Field. Ed Sheeran coming to town, MetLife Stadium, June 11th. Maybe you want to see Billy Joel ending that residency in the fall at Madison Square Garden. It's all up there on the Game Time app right now. Game Time is going to show you the images of your seats before you buy, so you know exactly where you're going to sit. You buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps, you're all set. Sent directly to your phone. You never have to dig through the email. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, other inclusions here for FIBA World Cup time. Just some, other Nets world names that have sort of shown up in and around this thing. Other reasons to tune in. Patty Mills, he is going to be taking part in Team Australia. That's been usually a pretty NBA-laden group, and it makes a lot of sense. Like they have, that's been, obviously a big country, the Australia, when it comes to the NBA. As I know, whenever we mention someone from Australia on the podcast, it ends up getting picked up elsewhere. Look, this is not like any kind of news. Like Australia's got a big feeder system for the NBA and well worth it, and obviously well deserved. Patty Mills is going to be part of that group that goes in and plays for Australia. Other guys on the Australian team: Matisse Thybulle, Joe Ingles, Jock Landale's on there, Josh Green, Matt Dellavedova still rolling, Jack White, Dyson Daniels. Those are some of the groups, or some of the guys that are going to be included in Team Australia. Ben Simmons does qualify to play for Team Australia. He is not currently on the team in an official way, but so he didn't make like the first initial group that was set out for training, but they have left the door open for him to play. So if you've been following the Ben Simmons thing, the time-honored tradition of Ben Simmons posting social media stuff around the off-season workouts has begun to happen. We've seen a bunch of those coming out through Instagram, either through his feed or his trainer's feed, looking like he's getting healthy. This sort of happens every offseason with Simmons. Not the only guy. Tons of NBA guys love to sort of tout what's happening in the offseason. Look, if I work that hard, I probably want to tout it too. So I'm not really taking a dig. It just is funny with Simmons. It does seem to happen pretty consistently with him every offseason. We had done an episode earlier a couple weeks ago where we talked about the possibility that he could be included in Team Australia. And we actually Adam and I really like that idea. It seemed to be we thought that would be a really, really good sign for his recovery and for his sort of comeback trail for him to be included in the Australian group. I am still a proponent of that. I hope it happens. I'm glad to see that it hasn't been ruled out entirely. They had mentioned the possibility that he could end up being part of the group, and they're leaving a roster spot open, it sounds like. I don't know when they need to solidify that sort of like in pen to make sure that he can actually be on the team. But the coach, Brian Gorgian, had said that like there's a spot for Simmons if he wants it, and if the recovery is there, then he could be included. I'm still holding out hope that this happens. I don't think it's like this sort of like crazy make or break sign for Simmons' whole season for him, to be on that team or not. He's expressed interest in wanting to play. It's been years since he's actually played with the Australian team. But the fact that like he's kind of expressed interest in wanting to do it, and it might just be a health thing, I think this would be a really good tune-up for him going into the season. Play with some young guys, play with some veterans. It's like a good mix of dudes on the Australian team, sort of just like I said, like NBA veterans down to NBA, some younger and up and coming guys. I think having a situation where he was on that squad would be a good landing spot for him. It's like the lights are kind of bright, but not NBA bright when it comes to FIBA. It would be, a pre-training camp kind of thing, getting up to game speed. Like I said, I think the pressure is a little bit lower. I know some people view the international competition thing as being a higher pressure environment. I don't know if that's like, I don't think that's the case when compared to the NBA, but it's like better than just, open gym kind of stuff, or probably, clearly better than preseason basketball, more competition than summer league, right? Like, he's not going to play summer league, but seeing Simmons out there playing for Team USA, or Team Australia in that scenario, I think would be cool. I think that I'm hoping it happens. I hope the recovery goes in the direction where he feels comfortable being able to do it. I hope it goes in the direction where the team is able to maybe like wait long enough to fill that roster spot for have him be able to go. I think that is like a relatively soft landing where he's concerned. Again, maybe other people view it a little differently if you think on the international stage where the stakes are a little bit higher. I think depending on how you feel, I'm definitely coming at this from like the USA standpoint, which maybe doesn't view it in the same light as maybe other countries do. So I totally get that. But I think, where Simmons is concerned, I think that he would probably, my guess is, say that that's less pressure than the bright lights of the NBA. But, I'm not Simmons, so I can't say that for sure. Regardless, I'm hoping that ends up being the case with him. Pairing him up with Patty Mills there, I think, is a good thing. Like I said, some of these other guys that are veterans and just sort of grinders on the NBA circuit would be a good way for him to sort of ingratiate himself back into the speed that is going to be happening, relatively soon after that in the NBA. And in terms of a testing ground for how the recovery has gone on the back and just the knees and everything that sort of plagued him over the course of last year since the surgery and really since he ended up coming over from Philadelphia, I like it. I'm hoping that that's the sort of direction they end up going with Simmons. So we'll see with him. Time, I don't think there's any rush to have that happen. Like, I'm not exactly sure what the time commitment is, like when they have to have it completely finalized for these FIBA rosters. My guess is it's a pretty fluid timeline, just because, like, I don't know, this stuff can change all the time. Injuries happen, other commitments happen, all kinds of stuff ends up just getting in the way. So I doubt that there's any crazy timeline on like when they needed to have it filled. And hopefully, look, hey, Simmons, keep posting the workout stuff. Let's make sure that the actual recovery, the offseason recovery, is going the right direction for him. Because I think if you're a Nets world, clearly the fate of the team and the upside of this team doesn't rest solely with Simmons, but there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot there, right? Like, he needs to be good for the Nets to entertain being, a really, really good team. For them to get to that sort of heights, Simmons has to be good. Like, we kind of know what they are without him. We saw that over the last third of the season with this group. If they were to bring pretty much back the same group as they had last season, assuming like a Cameron Johnson re-signing, we basically know that's like a 500-ish team. I think that's pretty much what it is. With Simmons, anywhere like 80% of what he used to be, 75%, the team's better. It's not rocket science. It's not a hot take. It's just is what it is. Like, so him being included there, we'll see. We'll kind of monitor that situation as it goes. Good to see that spot is still being held open. The other guy, Yuta Watanabe, has committed to play with Team Japan. Very cool. He is the situation for him. Oh, excuse me. I take it back. He is not committed to playing there. The speculation that he is going to play there, but he had said that he was going to leave it sort of open depending on what his free agent status was. So he's obviously a free agent here. It's unclear if he's going to be coming back to the Nets or not. He just finished off the $1.8 million contract last season. unclear about like where he's going to land, whether it's back with Brooklyn, whether it's with another team, whether he showed enough this season for another team to like what they saw from a floor spacing wing with some defense, has his limitations, but there was a time when he was he was as famous as it gets in Nets world when he just didn't seem like he could miss a corner three really in any situation. So looks like Watanabe will end up playing in FIBA as well. That looks like it's pretty much the long and short of it, although again, some of these teams have not been filled out completely. So there still remains some openings depending on where some of these other guys land. So again, just to reiterate, FIBA could be pretty cool when it comes to Nets world and just basketball in general. Different style than the NBA for sure. Benefits and rewards just different things on the basketball court. And but it'll be cool to see some of these Brooklyn guys getting their shot when it gets into it. I want to get into this Kyrie LeBron thing here in a second and just some general off-season shenanigans that continue through the NBA finals. We'll get to that in a second. First, going to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made very, very easy. Right now, during the NBA Finals, one Prize Picks user is going to get a chance to become a millionaire. One entry placed after 8 a.m. Eastern will be randomly selected each day. Whoever placed that entry will be getting the 6-pick flex, and here's the payouts. If you get 6 correct in that with that flex, $1 million. 5 correct, $80,000. 4 correct, $16,000. You can find the full details there. prizepicks.com/million. You have to opt in at that link, at the /million link, to be eligible for the $1 million entry. Prize Picks, look, they made it easy. Daily fantasy, you making entries. You're just going more or less on the player projections. For basketball, points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals. For baseball, you're going home runs, strikeouts, just more or less. Pick a player, you pick 2 to 6 players, figure out if they're going to go more or less on the Prize Picks projection. And like I said, those projections can be all different stats. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry, no competing against other people, just you versus the projections available. They got all the sports you could imagine as well. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First time users going to get 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All right, close it out here with just some NBA offseason. Like I said, shenanigans. Shams Charania, tweets out earlier on Monday, right around noon on Monday, something like that. Sources, Kyrie Irving has reached out to Lakers star LeBron James in an attempt to see if James would come to Dallas. Irving is a free agent this offseason. Look, this is the Nets podcast. Kyrie Irving doesn't play with the Nets anymore. I totally get it. Maybe you're sick of hearing about Kyrie Irving. I'm bringing it up here as to highlight sort of like how wild this NBA offseason can get. Adam and I have had an episode sort of in the bank here for a while, planning on going through just all these teams this season and how just like the great sort of ground shift that could happen in the NBA. Now, it could be a situation in this offseason where like so much could happen with every team that nothing ends up happening. We've been here before. Sometimes it feels like we're on the precipice of just tons and tons of stuff about to go down in the NBA, and then it kind of doesn't. I'm totally get it. The funny thing about this offseason is that there are some free agents, and there's some high-profile free agents that could be on the move, or that almost very, seem like they're very much going to be on the move, or like re-signing is really, really important for the current team that they're with. Kyrie Irving is one of those guys. I'm sort of laughing because this kind of thing, like this, it was LeBron James. He's got another year in a contract after this, by the way, but like, is he going to take some kind of buyout to go play with Kyrie Irving in Dallas? It sure doesn't seem like it. Does it feel like there's some weird subterfuge to get like the Lakers to move in on the Kyrie Irving thing by saying like, oh, there's this risk that LeBron James could be out to go play with Dallas and Kyrie and Luka? I guess so. I'm using this to highlight like sort of how bonkers this offseason could get, with just in terms of news, player movement, trades, teams that want to move off certain guys, teams that think they're going to try to go for it, free agents that are trying to, feel like they are going to get big contracts but want certain other things to happen. Kyrie Irving, even the thought that LeBron James and Kyrie would team up in Dallas with Luka, like even having it put out there, by Shams. Like it's so wild in the middle of this like very cool NBA finals, by the way, which I'm not even talking about because this other stuff kind of gets in the way. I just think it's hilarious. We're in just such a crazy world with NBA stuff right now. Do I think there's any world where this LeBron Kyrie piece happens in Dallas? No, I don't think there's any chance of that happening. The fact that it's even floated out there, trial balloon style, from one of, if not the biggest, I mean, there's only one of two, it's him and Woj, biggest sort of NBA mouthpieces when it comes to news and insider information. Like the Shams and Woj are so big, they're like basically two other NBA front offices combined or something like that, right? In terms of like getting stuff out there, leaking stuff, being tied in and just fully juiced into whatever's happening in the NBA. These dudes are like basically media arms for players and organizations. Like that's just it. They work for The Athletic, they work for ESPN, but they're bigger entities in some way, just because of like the information game that they're able to sort of harness. So when you hear that this piece with Kyrie and LeBron comes out, you're like, oh my God, like, are we staring at this situation where this could be just absolutely so wild of an offseason where we're even considering some of these things? I don't think this is going to happen, but it speaks to the possibility of wild, crazy things happening just because of how many players, sort of like situations are in flux, how many teams are in flux, how many teams might be unhappy with their situations. Like this is the kind of thing that Adam and I were going to talk about. So while it's not me harping on Kyrie, I don't think Kyrie, like having this new information out there, like there's nothing wrong. No one did anything wrong here. If I was Kyrie, I'd want to play with LeBron too. It makes total sense, right? Like I totally get that. Would Kyrie, LeBron, Luka super team be unbelievable? Yeah, of course. So, but it's more to highlight just this growing fascination with the machinations that happen in and around the NBA when it comes to just player news, player movement, who's happy, who's unhappy, who could go here, who could go there, what it would take to happen, what teams need to do, what teams might be staring down a weird future, what teams want to have something happen right here and now. This just kind of like summed it all up for me in one crazy piece of news that likely nothing else happens from, right? And just that's just the current state of the NBA. I think it's fun. I had a huge chuckle about it. I think it's hilarious that this would even be entertained. If it happened, I'd have to reevaluate what I believe can actually happen in the NBA in terms of off-season news, of course. But maybe we're entering that situation where like you just shouldn't rule out anything at this point, right? Anything can happen. Any player could be asked to move. Any player could just get bought out. Any player could just, choose to ride off into the sunset, like LeBron was just in a situation that he really wanted to do. Maybe you can just get guys, you can put so much pressure and on different organizations to do certain things to bend to the will of superstars that maybe this crazy stuff will end up happening. But I thought it just really spoke to sort of the mass hilarity that is happening in an offseason that could actually see tons more of this as we get into the draft. Like if Portland decides to move that pick, if Houston does something weird, like we could be just staring at some really, really crazy stuff happening in the NBA. And this is like in the middle of a finals, which is I thought the Nuggets were going to sweep. I thought it was an easy sweep here when it came to what was going to happen in Denver. I betting against Miami has proved to be wrong just nearly every single time. So that's just my bad. I just thought Denver was such a powerhouse that the net rating was like double the next best team in the playoffs so far. And this Miami thing, I still, no matter how many times I win, I just will never. How many times they win, I'll just never seem to understand exactly how it's happening. So the whole thing is just totally wild. But I thought the Kyrie and LeBron thing just deserved a little bit of a mention because, that the Kyrie show goes off to Dallas and it never stops producing content, whether you like that stuff or not. Okay. Adam and I will be back again tomorrow together, back on the podcast. We're going to be rolling, as promised, going to be rolling through some more draft stuff. Just a bunch of different players falling into this 21 and 22 range, which could get really, really cool on draft night. So we'll go through start going through some more names in addition to the ones that we've already covered. Maybe just kind of recircle on some of the guys whose names have been mentioned a few more times when it comes to the Nets. Make sure you are subscribed over at Locked On Nets on YouTube to be able to grab the videos here and also just some exclusive content. We're doing live stuff on YouTube as well. Some of the stuff you're just not going to see on the podcast feed. So make sure you subscribe over at Locked On Nets at YouTube. Adam is always the one that closes out the podcast with a quote from one of the great American poets. So once again, we'll just say for one more day before we come back together, Adam Armbrecht, the much missed, and can't wait to have him back, Adam Armbrecht, one of the great American poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.